and good evening, everyone. Thanks to the Society for hosting this evening. As Johanna said, our book, Secret Seas, took 8 years. And it was a great pleasure during that time to be able to dive in so many different parts of the country, many different parts, right from Musandam all the way down to the Flandinette Islands. It was amazing. And of course, Michel has done so many more dives than me. He's been here much longer than me, and he's got a very in-depth knowledge of Oman's underwater world. But from both our perspectives, it was still a long journey from in both senses. A little word of thanks to our sponsors, Omran Group, who sponsored the book, without whom Secret Seas just wouldn't have been possible. Just to quickly recap what I know Johanna's mentioned it, but Michel is going to talk about what makes Oman's seas very special and what influences them. And then we'll look at some of the, as I call it, the delights and the challenges of underwater photography, and hope to show you lots and lots of pictures and a little bit of background to some of the species. And then it will be over to Q&As. So with that, Michel, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you leave?
I got to quit. I've got to go.
Yep. Excellent.
Yeah.
So it's my turn now to find out where I need to be. And normally you should be able to see this.
Yes, we can see it.
You can see it. Okay. Yeah. So I will try to bring first a series of explanations as to why the seas of Oman are so special. And one of these specialty or uniqueness is Oman seas are very productive. And I would like to show you, okay, and it's not working. Yes, sorry. So I would like to share with you a landscape that we believe we are all familiar with, which is a coral reef environment. For all of us who are divers, this is a beautiful coral reefs, clear water, nice corals, lots of fish in the background. Water is transparent. And unfortunately, this is not Oman. Well, this is in Oman. This is one of the very rare days in May, end of May, June, where the water has these qualities. Otherwise, in Oman, it looks more like this. And this is what it was last week. It's green, it's extremely productive, it's full of phytoplankton. And this phytoplankton feeds a very large number of species, whether there are fish or invertebrate doesn't really matter. This is one of the characteristics of Oman seas. Now, if we move south in Dhofar, this is the landscape or the seascape that we can see in probably September, October, at the end of the Kharif. The water is also green, but in addition to the plankton in the water, you have giant seaweed that occupy the substrate absolutely everywhere in shallow water. This is also unique. And if you look at the surface, this is what you see. And this is very similar to what any diver would see probably in Norway or in Canada or in Scotland. You have a forest of seaweed and you don't see the bottom. But if you are careful and look at the bottom, that's what you can find, corals. So this is one of the few places in the world where at the same time, at the same place, you will find seaweed and corals. This is one of the unique characteristics of the Oman seas. Now, why is that? Well, it's because of a very rare phenomenon. It occurs probably in 6 or 7 places in the world, which is a seasonal upwelling. Now, why is that? And I need to go, unfortunately, a little bit in physics about that. Now, imagine you're sitting on the equator, the bottom arrow on my screen there. So this bottom arrow. And you think you are staying still, but unfortunately for you, you are not. You are moving at several thousand kilometers per hour in the direction of the arrow because the Earth spins on itself. Now, if you move further north, you still spin, but your speed is reduced because the diameter of the Earth compared to the axis of rotation is much smaller. And if you happen to be standing at the pole, you're not doing any speed at all, you're just turning on yourself. Every 24 hours, you turn 360 degrees. Now imagine that a bullet or water or wind or anything moves from the equator north. It is deviated towards the right because, of course, it retains the velocity it had originally. So anything that is moving north will always move northeast. And everything that is moving south will always move southwest in the northern hemisphere. The opposite is true in the southern hemisphere. This rule was figured out mathematically by a French engineer, Gustave de Coriolis, who discovered that in the end of the 17th century. So this is the velocity of the water in the south of Oman. The red arrow is the velocity of the water in, let's say, the north of Oman, and the different velocity pushes the water towards the right. Now, if we zoom in a little bit, we have the velocity of the water along the coast of Oman. The wind, the velocity of the water, and then this is in fact the trajectory of the water. It is deviated to its right. And this creates close to the shoreline a vacuum that is filled from underneath by cold, nutrient-rich water. Now, this is an image in January, and this is a normal. It's much cooler in the Arabian Gulf. We can see it here in purple. It's cool in the Sea of Oman, and it's also cool in the Arabian Sea, with a little bit warmer eddies towards the center of the Indian Ocean. Now, if we move, oops, I missed something. There we go. Sorry, I'm missing a screen there. I'll try to recuperate it. There we go. Can you still hear me?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. So this is the situation in the middle of August, and we can see here in the Arabian Gulf, the water is extremely hot, more than 30 degrees Celsius.
We don't have your slide though, Michel.
You don't have my slide.
I think you have to go back to sharing.
Yeah. And it doesn't seem to be willing to share. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yes.
No, I go to the fish immediately. I'm so sorry. Can you see this?
Yes.
You can
Okay.
see the map.
You can see the map. So it's really hot in the Arabian Gulf, and you can see these blue patches in the Arabian Sea that correspond to this deep cold water that is upwelled near the shore. It's in August. It should be hot, and it is not. And that's why we have these very unusual situation. These cold, deep water are full of nutrients. They bring the phytoplankton nutrients. That phytoplankton grows really well. And of course, the phytoplankton feeds the fish. And we have these very large school of sardines that are very common both in the Arabian Sea and the Sea of Oman that feeds on this extremely productive ocean. This barracuda feeds on the sardines and other small pelagic fish. And eventually we have the very large fish, such as the whale shark that feeds not on the phytoplankton or on the fish, but on the small zooplankton that feeds on the same phytoplankton blooms. The second characteristics is Oman has a lot of endemics. Now, endemic is a term generally used to describe species that are local to a certain geographic area. And I will start with one of the major actors of the Omani economy, at least in the south of Oman, which is the abalone. The Omani abalone is an endemic species. It can only be found between the Yemeni border and the Flandinette Islands. And that's a few hundred kilometers of shoreline, and that's it. It supports a very unhealthy fisheries, with many fishermen collecting more and more animals, to such a point that the government had to close the fisheries for several years and is now allowing the fisheries only for 1 month every year. But even that 1 month is probably too much. A second endemic species is this little blue coral that I discovered probably 10 years ago, maybe a little bit more. It's blue, it's beautiful, it's a little porites, and it rarely exceeds 5 centimeters across. So the colonies are very small. The third contestant in the endemic is the Omani Clownfish, also quite common and also only found in Dhofar. Its range goes between Salalah to the south and the Masira Island on the north. That's about 450 kilometers of coastline, and that's it. So if this animal disappears along its range, it disappears everywhere in the world forever. And the last one is a new species. We don't know what it is yet. Well, I know more or less what it is, but it hasn't been described yet. And yet it is the most common species of sea urchin in Dhofar. So it's not because something is common that it is not rare. So this species is rare worldwide, but it's very common in southern Oman. Now, if we put them in the map, that's what it looks like. So this is the blue coral. This is the Omani clownfish, Amphiprion omanensis. This is the sea urchin. And this is the abalone. And you can see there is a pattern there. And this is something that is quite unusual and also rather unique to Oman. This is the little clownfish in its environment. And these are the other species, or one other species on the left-hand side that is also found in Oman, but only in the Sea of Oman. This is Amphiprion clarki. Okay, now the next group is many marine organisms have eyes, and this is like an excerpt of the double page in the book that deal with eyes. And you can see they are extremely varied and extremely colorful. But if an organism has eyes, it's for a good reason. It's to see. So to see things, there are two reasons why you need to have eyes. One is to try to find organisms that camouflage themselves. And the other one is to try to find organisms that show their markings. Both are very useful for marine organisms. And I will focus in the next group of organisms to these that do camouflage. They try to hide in their environment. And aposematism, that organism that try to show themselves to avoid predation. And it will require a little bit of an explanation. So aposematism is showing warning coloration. And I will start with a non-marine organism to explain the concept. This is a little butterfly that is found everywhere in the UK and in Europe. They might have a species here in Jebel Akhdar, I'm not sure. These little butterflies are extremely visible, black with red markings. And they are very visible because they're extremely toxic. They contain cyanide. So any birds that eat these things will be seriously sick. And so it's a warning coloration against the bird. Don't eat me, you will suffer. So there are several species of these zygenes that function in exactly the same way. Now, this is one of these nudibranch that are found in Oman and in many other places. They also show this aposematic coloration for a very good reason. They are toxic. They accumulate toxin from their prey, and they typically eat sponges, hydrozoans, bryozoans, organisms that are sessile, cannot move, and therefore over thousands of years of evolution have developed really good chemical warfare. So these little nudibranch eat their prey and store their toxic chemicals and themselves become toxic to their predator. They have amazing colors all over the rainbow, from the smallest one to some larger one. Now this one is a little bit different. This is a true nudibranch. It has three main colors: yellow, black, white, and orange, four main colors, very bright. This, on the other hand, is not. This animal is a flatworm. Now, this is a nudibranch, very toxic, don't eat me. This is a flatworm, not toxic at all, very good to eat. But of course, a predator won't make the difference. I'm pretty sure that many of you would have said, well, it's the same. It's not. Here you can see the tuft of gills on the back and the two rhinophores in the front. Oops, sorry. These guys have absolutely nothing like that. They are completely flat. They have no external additional structure. Same story with this particular organism, which is the sea crate. Sea crates are relatively rare. Paul and I have trying to make a picture of them for a long time, but they are a real snake and extremely venomous. On the other hand, this is a fish, and this fish looks like a sea crate, mimics the sea crate in this behavior, but is absolutely harmless. It's kind of eel. So we have already a two level of complexity. We have organisms that are aposematic, and then you have organisms that are mimics of aposematics. The next group are organisms that are camouflaged. So they disappear in their environment. And now the first image I'll show you is, yeah, you'll say, yeah, it's bright red. So of course, it's not going to disappear in its environment. But Paul will show you later that light is pretty tricky in the water. And without a flash, this organism disappears quite easily. Excuse me. So let's look at a couple of these. This is the same species as the first one. Bright red with white spot. This is the same image in black and white. And the fish is already a lot more camouflaged. But if you add the lack of resolution of most marine organism eyes, it becomes quite clear that this fish is pretty well camouflaged and very much more difficult to see. In addition, these lionfish will often have very slow movement, very similar to that of a seaweed in the current, that makes them pretty difficult to see for a prey. Other fish in the same family, the scorpion fish, bring the level of camouflage to another level. These are not impossible to see, but a lot more difficult to see than the lionfish. And many divers have had serious encounters with the scorpion fish by trying to land on them or putting their hands on them without noticing that there is in fact a fish there. Now this one pushed the camouflage even further by accepting a little starfish climbing on its skin. So this is, you can see the two eye, well, one eye here, one eye on the other side. The mouth is on the right-hand side. So this fish is extremely well camouflaged and very difficult to see. Now the champion in that family are the stonefish. And this is the stonefish on the bottom. I don't know if you see it, but I'll show you where it is. There it is. You have the two eyes and the mouth. These are nearly impossible to see. In fact, when I took that picture, well, I took a picture of something else that was 20 centimeters higher on that face rock, on that, sorry, rock face. And it's only when I discovered that I was going to put my elbow on a fish that I noticed that there was a fish. This is the same species, but outside of its camouflage area, outside of the sand. Very dangerous organisms. Now, the champion of camouflage is probably the decorator crab. Now, you are going to tell me, where is the decorator crab? And I agree with you, it's difficult to see. These are the two eyes. These are the two front claws. And these are additional legs. Now, even after seeing this, they are still extremely difficult to visualize. Now, there's another one. The two eyes are there. And then this is the outline of the decorator crab. They'll tend to use decoration which is available in their own environment. Here we have little bits of sponges, blue, white, and orange. And it probably, if we look around this crab, we'll find the same kind of sponges. Now, larger animals can also be pretty well camouflaged. The cuttlefish, for instance, will not only change its color to mimic the background environment in which it lives, here corals, but will also change the texture of its skin. Here, these little irregularities at the surface of the skin makes it pretty difficult to see underwater. Now, the champion in the mollusks group is the octopus. Now, there's an octopus there. And this is the same octopus a few seconds later after escaping. And now back to Paul for more information about taking pictures on the water. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Michel. Right, let me do the necessary. Okay, just one sec. Did you click out, Michel?
I'm out.
I'll say, all right. Wrong software. Okay, here we go. Share. Right. Right, here we are. Okay, now there are some very big differences between land and underwater photography. So I'd like to start by giving you a little bit of an idea about some of what I call the delights and the challenges involved. The delights, of course, are capturing a beautiful or an informative image and the encounter itself. But as you can imagine, there are a few challenges. Hello. It's not moving. Yes, it is. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. So light is a very precious commodity underwater. And with water being 800 times denser than air, it absorbs colors very quickly, as Michel was alluding to earlier. So for example, the reds disappear very shallow, about 5 meters, while all other colors progressively disappear with increasing depth until at around 60 meters, blue disappears completely. So powerful flash units are needed, as you can see on my camera system here on the left picture. And they're needed to bring back the missing colors. The water column, that is the water in between the subject and the camera, has an effect of reducing the sharpness of the image. And so the trick is to make selections about the lenses being used so that you can get as close as possible to the subject and reduce that distance in the water column. It's not so much of an issue when you're shooting small creatures because you have to be close anyway. But when you're photographing a whale shark, which can reach 12 meters, I'll put on a fisheye lens, which will enable me to get within a meter or two of the subject, but still get this huge body in the frame. Back to Michel again here. Stability is a big challenge in the water, being able to remain stable. And so having really good diving skills makes all the difference to achieving good shots. Michel's obviously taking a picture of this sleepy green turtle, but he's trying to stay stable and not move very much. But if you think about it, on land, the photographer is generally trying to remain as stable as possible. But underwater, everything is in constant motion. You, the subject, and the water, your whole world. Here's a Clarkson anemone fish with her anemone, both surviving in the shallows and having to withstand very strong wave action and tidal surges, which I also had to withstand to take this photo. Excellent buoyancy control is needed to remain stable. And this is so important because we don't want to bang into delicate corals or marine creatures. And apart from avoiding damaging the delicate life around you, which is obviously everywhere, there are some rather venomous critters around. Again, Michel mentioned the stonefish. Well, this one is sitting on top of the sand and all the grit and very clearly to be seen. But it is the world's most venomous fish. The pain can be so bad that people who've been stung have been heard to beg for their affected limb to be cut off. And a bad envenomation without any treatment would almost certainly be horribly fatal. Scorpion fish, like their stonefish cousins, are very well camouflaged and hardly move. So it is very easy for an unwary photographer to place a finger or two to steady themselves right on one of these fish, which would indeed give the diver a very bad day. On the other hand, their camouflage has them thinking that they're invisible. And so you're usually able to get very close to them until, that is, they realize they've been spotted. And this scorpion fish is giving me a threat warning. As tiny as it is, it's telling me that with its wide open mouth, don't come any nearer, go away, otherwise I'm going to eat you. Without doubt, some of the most beautiful fish on the reef are the lionfish. They're also venomous, but while the sting from them wouldn't be fatal, it will be painful. I particularly like this picture, blowing my own trumpet, simply because of the symmetry of the urchin and the fish. And of course, there's our wide range of subjects. Many have a very annoying habit of swimming away just as you've raised your camera. And I can tell you, I've got lots of photographs of the back ends of fish and other creatures. Patience isn't always rewarded. But you might be surprised to learn that individuals of the same species have different personalities. Cuttlefish and turtles, which I love to photograph, can be very shy and swim away as soon as you approach them. Other individuals would let you get really close to them, provided you move slowly and respectfully. I love this male cuttlefish's gentle embrace as he protects the female while she's looking for a safe place to deposit her eggs. Some creatures seem to get a kick out of posing for the camera. And for me, these are very memorable moments. The Razzle Jins Turtle Reserve, operated by Oman, is one of the world's most important green turtle rookeries. Each year, some 20,000 of them come to this beach in Razzle Jins, Razzle Had, to dig nests and lay clutches of between 80 to 100 eggs or more. And then some 60 days later, hatchlings scramble out of the sand and make the long walk to the water. With just 1 in 1,000 hatchlings, roughly, making it to adulthood, the conservation work done at Razzle Jins is really, really important. Encounters with turtles, whether it's on land or in the water, never seem to fail to delight us. And I don't know, I sometimes wonder, whether it's their gentle, charismatic characters, or maybe it's an age-old wisdom in their eyes that entrance us. Sharks are among the most endangered of all marine animals. Each year, it's estimated that 100 million sharks are caught, mostly for the shark fin trade for China. Even 30 or 40 years ago, Oman's shark population would have been quite abundant. Now, it's incredibly rare to see any while diving in Oman seas. Species like the tiger, the bull, and the hammerheads, which are all true apex predators, have been fished out practically to extinction. In 7 years diving here, I've only ever seen one nurse shark. This one is sleeping in a rocky hollow in the Flandinette Islands, or I've had fleeting glimpses of blacktips while snorkeling around the Domaniacs. Fahal used to be called Shark Island due to the large population of blacktips, but they've mostly disappeared too, although juveniles can occasionally be seen while snorkeling, but they are extremely shy. But when you do see sharks underwater, you just have to admire them. Their sleek forms and their amazing senses have evolved over millions of years, making them extremely important, efficient predators. But despite all the gruesome stories I guess we've all heard, more people are killed by toasters each year than sharks. Blacktip and like this sicklefin lemon sharks can be found here, but mostly, sadly, in the fish soups. The exception is in the Oman aquarium. And despite their rarity, Michel and I both felt that having some shark photos in secret seas was important. And these images were taken in the Oman Aquarium's big tank. But thankfully, there are still some other sharks that we can still see in the wild here. Zebra sharks can often be seen in the Domaniacs, resting on the seabed or under rocky ledges. They're very docile and quite approachable, and they feed mostly on mollusks and small fish. Their bodies are incredibly flexible, and their tough skin protects them as they weave in and out of the tight rocky or coral crevices as they're looking for prey. Stingrays are very common in Oman seas, and you can see them all year round. And we've got quite a few different species here. This is a black blotched stingray, and at around 2 meters across, it's probably the biggest individual I've ever seen here, and quite likely quite old too. And if you look at the underside, you can see some of the mouth parts which are used for grasping and grabbing onto their prey and grinding them. And their prey consists mostly of shellfish, crabs, and shrimps. Most stingrays have sharp, bony barbs on their tails, and they're capable of inflicting very nasty wounds indeed. With this blue-spotted stingray, you can see the barb around on the top of the tail, around about the midpoint. And say very dangerous, and if you're unlucky, and you may remember the filmmaker Steve Irwin, who was killed a few years ago when a barb penetrated his chest. But you have to say that, like most marine animals, stingrays are not usually a threat to us at all, provided we don't crowd them or stress them out. I have dived with dozens of stingrays over the years and have been very close, even while they've been hunting in little groups, and I've never felt threatened. An eagle ray, and again, you can see the 2 barbs here, just at the base of the body, at the base of the tail. And there's a big pointed nose stingray, pretty meaty animal. And coming to now from the ones with the big stings to our friends, the whale sharks. The world's biggest fish, and they're gentle, plankton-eating giants, and the seasonal visitors to Musandam, to the Damiette Islands, and even down south in Dauphin. And despite their great size, they're not a danger to humans at all. But sadly, they are endangered and at risks, not just from the effects of global warming, but also from bycatch, net entanglement, plastics, pollution, and unregulated tourism. On the bright side, several parts of the world, notably Western Australia and the Philippines, have turned their whale shark populations into tourist attractions. And so interactions with humans, if sensibly managed, can become a key part of conservation. And Oman can play a leading role in this, which would benefit tourism and also help prevent this amazing giant from disappearing forever. Now, Michel gave us a few sneak previews of nudibranchs. I'm going to show you a few more, but I'd like to tell you something about them. They're known as the jewels of the seas, or sea slugs, which is a phrase I don't like very much. Prefer jewels of the seas. They're invertebrates, and if you're not a diver, you may be less familiar with them. There are something like 3,000 individual species of them, and they're found in every ocean. And they come in a huge variety of sizes, shapes, colors, and patterns. And as Michel would say, they rival butterflies for their beauty. They're slow moving, and lacking the shell, you'd think that these little creatures are defenseless. In fact, they are expert masters of defense. The diets of some include tiny jellyfish and anemones, and as they eat them, they absorb their prey stinging cells intact and unfired, and then transfer them to little sacs on their backs called sarata, which they can then use to discharge a very painful surprise for any animal that tries to eat them. Others use camouflage as the secret to their survival. And then there are others again that eat sponges and use the toxins found in the sponges that they digest to produce foul-tasting acid secretions. Perhaps it sounds a little bit gruesome, but they are truly beautiful creatures and favorite subjects for most underwater photographers, including me. This is a Spanish dancer. It's the world's biggest nudibranch and can grow to nearly a foot in length. Oops. Again, an example of the diverse patterns and beauty of these incredible little creatures. Moray eels are very common here in Oman, and they do hold a few surprises. My all-time favorite is this particular species, the beautiful and dramatically patterned dragon moray. And they're found in the southern part of the Arabian Sea. And although their mouths are filled with razor-sharp needle-like teeth, they're actually a very shy and reclusive species that prefer to hide in deep rocky recesses. And that also makes them very difficult to photograph. You have to be patient and wait for them to either be curious or get hungry. My next favorite is another shy species, the Zebra Mori. But in here, instead of sharp teeth, they have a mouthful of molars, molar-type teeth, which they use for grinding their food, which includes small crustaceans. But if you're looking for sheer size and power, then the honeycomb moray eel is the one for you. They can reach 2.5 meters in length, and this one wasn't far off. A curious fact is that moray eels can't swallow, so they have another set of jaws called the pharyngeal jaw in the back of their throats that they can make rise up into their mouths, grab the food, and then deliver it to their gullets. A little bit like the monster, if you remember, from the original Alien movie. If you've ever been snorkeling or diving here, you'll already have a very good idea about the beauty of Oman's underwater world. Life is everywhere on the reef, and it's a feast for the eyes. We have nearly 200 species of hard and soft corals in Oman. And some of these communities are quite old. This large Porites coral is possibly 200 or so years old. The diver gives us some idea of the size. And the craggy recesses of corals on the reef harbor untold numbers of marine organisms, like this beautiful but tiny marble coral shrimp. Then there's Oman's only endemic anemone fish, found only in Dhofar. Sorry. Sitting here in its cozy home of bubble tip anemone. Parrotfishes constantly graze on turf algae on rocks and corals. A byproduct of their diet is the very fine sand that they pass, which over millennia has helped create Oman's expansive golden beaches. So perhaps just remember that the next time you're walking barefooted along the beach, that you're actually and partly walking on parrotfish poo. There we go, that's a thought. On a night dive, meanwhile, you may see a parrotfish settling down to sleep. I caught this one a little bit before it went to sleep, and when it's sleeping, they actually create a bubble cocoon from their mucus to prevent them sending signals out to parasites and other creatures which might predate on them. You might see a crocodile fish, and they can be up to 1 meter long, or big versions, big individuals. And they can sit absolutely stationary, waiting for prey to pass by. But despite their name, and perhaps their slightly fearsome look, they're actually very harmless to humans. A myriad of different species of butterfly fish glide over the reefs here, pecking on tiny crustaceans and mollusks. While great schools of golden sweepers congregate in the day under rocky ledges and in caves, they disperse at night to feed. And it's not uncommon to see beautiful backfish hanging out just below the surface. They're very curious fish and will often approach divers and snorkelers. And this burrfish, it's a member of the porcupine and parrotfish family, has eyes that almost seem like they're opals. Then we have a few of the larger and beautiful beauties on the reef. Oops, the angelfish. This is an emperor angelfish, and they can actually cluck and grunt if they get stressed. I try not to stress animals while I'm taking photographs, but I've heard it once or twice. If I've got too close to them and you hear this kind of thudding sound that they produce. It's a yellow bar angelfish. One of the prizes, if you're really, really lucky, is that you might find a small pod of curious dolphins approach you, come and check you out. Really, there's never a dull moment in Oman's underwater world. Even if a dive isn't photographically productive, there are certain to be some amazing encounters and experiences to be had. So thank you very much, and over to you.